guys, Boxing Gossip here. Delighted to once again be joined by Dave Allen on the channel. Dave, thanks very much for taking the time to speak to me. Been a huge amount of change since last time we spoke. How's things going working with Matchroom first and foremost?
Yeah, everything's going well. Since we last spoke, I think I've had 2 fights now.
Yes.
The one on the Bull, the one on the Hey Bellew show. So things, I can't really complain, you know, everything's going great. I've had some news about my next fight today. You know, my next 2 fights are more or less set in stone, so everything's going great now. We're in a good position now. I'm in a position really where the only way that my career is not going to go where I want it to go is if I don't put the work in. So that's a nice place to be in.
Fantastic. And what can you tell us about those next 2 fights, Dave?
Well, the next fight, you know, I found out this morning. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say yet, but it's going to be this month.
Okay.
It's going to be on another big Matchroom card, leading on to what I hope is going to be a potential title fight with Ian Lewison at Bramall Lane. So that's the one that's leading up. The next one's going to be a 6-round rubber league, and the one after that, I'm hoping he's going to be against Ian Lewison, hopefully for a title. So, you know, it's a big 6 weeks coming up now. Fantastic.
So yeah, that would be on the Kell Brook undercard, the Ian Lewison fight, would it?
Yeah, you know, Kell Brook shows at Bramall Lane. It's only 10-15 minutes away from my house, so it makes sense to be on that bill, you know, in terms of selling tickets. It's a massive card, so yeah, that's the one that I'm really gearing up towards. I've got a 6-round and a 4-round, which I might as well say it's on the Murray Rosado card.
Okay.
So yeah, you know, I think that's going to be a 6-rounder, and then the Kell Brook show. It's not definitely Ian Lewison. It's not definitely for a title. It's not definitely anything, but you know, it's 99% get a win on that card. I'll be fighting on the Kell Brook show.
Understood, yeah. And that 6-rounder, is that likely to be against a similar level of opposition to the 2 guys you fought most recently, Dave?
Yeah, you know, it's just about getting another win. It's about doing what I'm doing in the gym, doing it in the ring for real, you know. And it's not really, we don't really want a live opponent. The Kell Brook show, the show at Bramall Lane, there's only been one professional boxing show ever held at Bramall Lane on the pitch, and that was in 1986, and my dad boxed there his last professional fight. So for me to fight at Bramall Lane 30 years on from my dad and his last professional fight there, you know, it means quite a lot to me and my dad. So, you know, we just want an easy, steady job, and we want to get onto Bramall Lane in a big fight, and that's what it's all about. That's the main objective now, is the Bramall Lane card. But I'm not going to look past whoever we're fighting in Liverpool.
Makes complete sense. It's a big story, I guess, definitely. And Dave, would the Ian Lewison fight, do you see that serving as a final eliminator maybe for the British title? So the winner of that fight would go on to face the winner of Sexton Cornice.
I think the winner of me and Ian Lewison is the best domestic heavyweight. Is the best domestic heavyweight in Britain. You know, I think both of us beat Sexton and Cornish, but they've been mandated for the British title, so that's what's happening. You know, the winner of me and Ian definitely will get a British title shot, I would imagine. You know, the winner of us, I can't see how it would fail. I can't see how the board could fail to make us the mandatory challengers to the winner of that fight. So the idea of me wanting Ian Lewison is so that the winner fights the winner of Cornish and Sexton.
Definitely. So looking at Ian Lewison, I guess he's a guy who's known for having a good punch resistance, and he's shown, you know, good chin in the past. So, you know, I appreciate your more recent fights have ended quickly, you know, but potentially that's one that could go deep into the fight, and that you're going to have to, you know, look to maybe even win on points. I don't know. What's your tactics for approaching a fight of that nature with a guy like Ian Lewison?
Well, the way I beat Ian Lewison is not to get him out there in a round or two, you know. That's the way Ian Lewison wins the fight. Ian Lewison's a big puncher, very strong, very tough. And even though he's very tough and strong and he can punch, he's only really very strong and punches very hard for a couple of rounds. So, you know, I would go into that fight looking to get to halfway, but, you know, I'd look to get to, in the Dylan White fight, my plan was to get to halfway and go from there. Fighting Ian Lewison, the plan from whoever I fight from now on is to get to halfway, and that's when my strength and my physical fitness comes into play. But I've got to get to halfway, and I've got to get to halfway and still be in the fight. Dylan White fight, I got to halfway and I was 5 rounds down. So, you know, if I fight Ian Lewison, the plan is to get to halfway, be well in the fight, and then take over from there. You know, That's the plan in all fights. I've come on 100 times since the White fight, the Ortiz fight. I not really had a chance. The whole fight, I just took him out there in 30 seconds. The David Howe fight, I just got a little bit excited and just thought I was going to hit him and take him out because, I knew he probably didn't have the greatest chin in the world. So I'm hoping to get the next fight out of the way. And then Ian Lewison is someone that, I can really get my teeth into that. And it's the fight I want, I think it's a fight that a lot of people want to see. I'm not saying Ian Lewison's one of the best heavyweights in the world because he's not, but he's definitely one of the best around domestic level. And if he's fit, I believe he's a handful for anyone. So I think it'd be a great win on my record, and it sets me up for the fight for the British title. Makes
sense. And Dave, I've noticed you've been looking on your social media posts. You've been looking a lot leaner recently. Is your plan to come in at like a low weight for that fight against Lewison, especially as he's a guy who, as you say, may potentially fade towards the second half of the fight?
I'm just training, to be honest. I'm just training, eating well, and whatever I weigh, I will weigh. Feeling a lot better in training. What I'm doing now is I'm training twice a day, 6 days a week, whereas before, I'll be looking to get 3 or 4 sessions in at a time. We're just building and building off my. Well, I've always had stamina from being a kid. I've done sports all my life, but I'm starting to throw punches now. I'm throwing them in combination, and it's a slow process. Ian Lewison or whoever. Whenever I fight at Bramall Lane, it'll be a proper fight. I'm talking about Ian Lewison because that's the fight that's kind of been talked about, but. The fight at Bramall Lane will be a proper fight. There's not going to be a 6-rounder. It's not going to be someone against someone who's an opponent. It's going to be someone who's coming to win. It's going to be a 10 or 12-rounder. So I need to train like this. I've been in 2 big fights now, unprepared. So I'm not going to do that for the 3rd time. I want to give myself the best opportunity of winning. Whether I win or not. I'm not going to go into fights anymore when I'm not going to give myself the best opportunity to win.
Definitely. Do you think the momentum that you've now got, working with Matchroom and getting these successive dates and, getting on TV, do you think that makes a huge difference in terms of making sure that next time you're in a big fight, the result's going to be very different?
Yeah, when I boxed the whole, I've trained well for the whole fight, and then the half fight came around, so I didn't really get a chance to train in between, but straight after the half fight, I knew I was going to be out again. It could have been the Crawler Bill. Could have been the Glasgow Bill, could have been the Liverpool Bill. I knew I was going to be out within the next 6-7 weeks maximum. So you can't force me out of the gym. Whereas before, I didn't really know when a fight was coming. So I just kind of didn't do anything. But now I know that fight's always going to be around the corner. As long as I keep winning, there's going to be a fight around the corner. So I'm just training. And I'm not saying that I don't train ridiculously hard. We don't train for hours on end every day. We just do an hour in the morning. We do an hour in the evening, and that's. You keep doing that over a sustained period of time. You're going to build fitness. You're going to keep learning, and it's all coming together now. Like I said, working with Matchroom and knowing that I'm going to be fighting regularly. It keeps you in the gym.
I can see that. Well, one thing I've noticed, Dave, is certainly the commentary team on Sky and perhaps some of the the Matchroom team members. I've heard a lot of people referring to your power and how the power that you're hitting with is a force to be reckoned with at heavyweight. Now obviously I've been watching you since your early fights, and I've kind of, perhaps wrongly, always thought you in my head as more of a boxer style fighter as opposed to a puncher. I appreciate usually it's somewhere between the two, but do you think you're hitting harder these days, or why is it? Do you think you're punching differently? Why is it that the knockouts have started to come, and this reputation seems to be growing?
Well, I think we can look at this. You can look at it a lot of different ways. I turned pro as a 20-year-old kid. I don't think I'm the biggest puncher in the world. I hit hard enough, I would say. I'm not a massive puncher, but I'm not a light puncher either. I'm just a little bit heavy-handed. But the knockouts coming for 2 reasons. 1, because the opposition is not great, and 2, because I'm landing cleaner shots and throwing more punches. Early in my career, I stopped people. That was because I was fighting people at a poor level. The knockouts are going to stop when you find Dylan White and Lewis Ortiz. The wins were stopping, never mind the knockouts. I've always been able to punch a little bit, but you've got to be able to hit him for 1, to be able to get him out of there, and 2, you've got to be able to hit him on the chin, or in the body, or on top of the head, or wherever. So, I'm not the biggest puncher in the world, but at the same time, I'm not a light puncher, so I don't really worry about being able to punch or not. You know, there's a lot of fighters that get to the top without being the biggest puncher in the world. So I see myself really, you know, when I fight the likes of Ian Lewison, I will be in there as a boxer, not as a puncher. I won't be going in there to knock him out. I'm going in there to box. And I think that's when you'll see the best of me. And I think that's when I'm more likely, the knockout's more likely to come for myself. So, you know, I do see myself more of a boxer than a puncher. So, you know, they can only face me as a puncher if they want. You know, it helps to sell. It helps the casual fan say, look, Dave Allen's a big puncher. But looking at it myself, you know, well, but I'm all right with it.
Makes sense. Dave, I've got to ask you about some of the other big fights in the heavyweight division briefly. I guess the first one to mention is Joseph Parker, Hughie Fury, that's been announced since when we last spoke. Is that a fight you've got a strong opinion on either way?
I just think Hughie, with the time out that he's had, he's been out of the ring now for quite a long time. That's a big worry for me going to a fight against Joseph Parker. I think the inactivity could play a crucial role in the fight. First and foremost, you know, I hope Hughie wins. You know, I like Hughie a lot. I get along with his dad really well. It's just a fight that I would probably have to fancy Joseph Parker in. I think Joseph Parker's had the better position, and I think the inactivity that Hughie's had, I think he's going to be up against it in the fight. I think Hughie's going to go in there. Hughie's got all the chance in the world about boxing Joseph Parker, but the inactivity is the one thing that really puts me off. You know, it's really hard to be out of the ring for over a year and fight anybody. Never mind going against heavyweight champion of the world. So I would head towards Parker, but you know, I would expect Hughie's going to give more kinds of nightmares. You know, if Parker doesn't win, he's going to have to solve the defensive puzzle like is Hughie Fury, and then go about beating him. So you know, it's a good fight. It's one that I'm really looking forward to. I'm hoping Hughie pulls it off, and then. You know, we've got all the belts really in Britain, apart from Wilder.
Definitely. And Tony Bellew versus David Haye. You know, I know you've sparred with Bellew in the past. I was massively surprised with the result of that fight. Obviously, Haye appeared to have an injury, but nevertheless, Bellew did a huge amount better than I anticipated. As someone who's served the ring with Bellew, you know, were you as surprised? Did you give him a live chance in that fight?
I didn't give him any chance. I gave him zero chance, to be honest. I expected it to be over in a round or two. I thought Haye had punched too hard. You know, we've seen Bellew on the floor against Danny Stevenson, you know, who is a massive puncher, but down at 3 or 4 stone lighter than Haye weighed in at. So I couldn't see any way that Bellew would win. You know, obviously the injury played a big part in it. I had David Haye probably winning nearly every round up until the injury, but you know, Bellew stood up to Haye's biggest punches. It was still in the fight. And you know, we'll never know what would have happened. You know, maybe Bellew would have come on top and come on strong and got on top anyway. But I guess we'll never know now. But you got to give all the credit to Tony Bellew, really. You know, he stood up to Haye's punches in the early round, which no one expected him to. And then, even with the injury, you know, you got to give him credit. He carried on it. It wasn't easy. David Haye's not an easy man to beat on one leg. Yeah. So, you know, we've got to give credit to Bellew. The fight will probably happen again. I think the rematch will happen. I don't see Bellew fighting the likes of Dylan White because Dylan White doesn't have a belt. I think Bellew's either going to fight one of the belt holders or he's going to wait for David Haye. So, yeah, you got to get all credit to Tony Bellew. You know, hopefully he gets some big fights off the back of it, and hopefully David Haye comes back and the rematch happens, because the fight was a mad one, but it was definitely entertaining though.
It was, yeah, definitely agree there. And I guess the final one I've got to ask you about, probably one of the biggest fights about there at present, is obviously Vladimir Klitschko versus Anthony Joshua. So I think I've heard you talk about this fight in the past, but you know, we're getting closer now. I think we're 5 weeks away. How are your thoughts developing as we get closer to that fight?
I look at it in two ways. Like, I think Klitschko, from before the Fury fight, would be a massive favourite against Joshua at this point, because Joshua, really, who is he boxed? You know, Dylan White is probably still his best opponent, and the Dylan White that he boxed is not the Dylan White that we see today. So, you know, Breezy's a good fighter, but the likes of Charles Martin and Eric Molina, going from these fighters, going from Dylan White at that stage of his career, going from Charles Martin, Molina to Vladimir Klitschko is a massive step up, But like I said, the inactivity again, Klitschko's not boxed for 18 months. He's getting on a little bit now, he's 41. So, I don't know, but I kind of edge towards Klitschko in the fact that he's got all that experience, and Klitschko from two. You know, I'll be very confident they would beat Joshua at this stage. But the inactivity and the fact that he is 41 makes me want to side towards Joshua. But you know, if I had to make a choice out of the two of them, knowing both of them things, I'd probably have to go with the experience. The experience of Klitschko. You know, Klitschko can definitely punch, and if he can still pull the trigger, which is my only worry at his age and with the inactivity, I expect Klitschko to knock Joshua out. But at the same time, it sounds mad, but at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if Joshua takes mine in a round or two.
Definitely. You've sparred with both, haven't you?
Yeah, I sparred with both, yeah.
Do you have an instinct as to who the bigger hitter is out of the two of them?
I think Klitschko's got more power, but Joshua will be faster. But Joshua's fast for the reason that he has got fast hands, but he's just got that real killer instinct, you know. And I think that's the kind of thing that makes you think Joshua will go in there with no fear and let his hands go. And Klitschko's known to freeze, especially at this age. You know, Joshua will steamroll straight through him. But I just think the difference that I see between the both of them is Klitschko's got a real world-class jab, one of the best jabs in heavyweight boxing of all time. And Joshua, for me, doesn't really have a jab. So if Klitschko gets the jab going early, starts hitting Anthony with a jab, makes Anthony a little bit gun-shy because of his getting hit with the big stiff jab, sets him up with the right hand. That's how I'm seeing things going. But you know, Klitschko's got to turn the clock back a few years to do that.
Absolutely. No, makes sense, Dave. One to look forward to. Dave, that's what I had down to ask you about, mate. I really appreciate you taking the time. Unless you got anything else to add, I'll let you go there, mate.
Thank you very much, mate. Thank you.
All the best, Dave. Thanks again for coming on. Cheers, Dave.